And what's going on? What's wrong with this? Why we cannot have a free republic, have a constitutional republic? I mean, what kind of challenges we are facing? I think that's probably the main theme in my project. Um, you see this cycle. I mean, we have one dynasty after another. It's really lots of them. Even most of the Chinese don't know how many dynasties we have. Some of them are very brief, probably just a few years, very short, and some others maybe longer, 100 to 200 years, but their fate are always the same. At the beginning, maybe this kind of peace, prosperity, but later they will all corrupted, all, I mean, despotic. So another revolution, violent, and and then the civil war, things like that. It's always going on. So here are some of the dynasties. Really, the first one we call it Qin dynasty. So it's until now it's more than 2,000 years actually. Before that Qin dynasty, we have several others, but it's not the same as this kind of dynasties because before this Qin dynasty, we called China as a feudal society, feudal system. It's pretty like the European Middle Age, the European society. But after this one, all I mean the how to say quite centralized dynasties, unlike before. Yeah, some of them, many. You see, some of the later dynasties are really pretty long. Looks like over 200 years, but it's never changed the regime, never changed the system. It changed the name of the emperors, changed the family, but the governance, the rule is the same for such a long time. This is the first emperor. This guy is a crazy one. He's a very strong man, strong person, and he killed thousands of intellectuals during his tenure. He he burned many books at that time, which is a notorious story. And this is another emperor, which is was regarded as one of the greatest emperors in Chinese history. He reigned for a long time uh, in the Qing dynasty, and also during his reign, it was regarded as the most prosperous period in Chinese history. Uh, but even he didn't, I mean, change the nature of the Chinese regime, Chinese government. Oh, sorry. You see this one? I think you guys know this one. Yeah. Well, we have a saying in China: the emperor is far away, which means that for the local people, you have to govern yourselves because the emperor is too far from you. But it's not really far; it's still there. So every leader want to become the emperor. Actually, I mean, if they don't say it, it's in their mind, it's in their heart. They want to be regarded as the emperor. If you go to some rural parts of China, the people talk about the top leader only by referring as emperor. My mom frequently told me that. So the former guy, President Hu, so the local peasants always refer to as Emperor Hu. So even if he's not strong as this one, not as strong as this one, but they always refer to top leader as the emperor for the local, the rural people. In their mind, that's the emperor. He can do anything. So it's basically the mindset of the people on the ground. So one of the interesting things is that we see the other countries which also have a long history of empire or dynasties, but their dynasty is different from China's. Like in Japan, in Great Britain, their emperors, their kings always have a kind of close relationship. They have a kin relationship, they have blood relationship. But in China, no. Everybody can become an emperor. If you can overthrow the older one, you can become the emperor. So everybody has ambition, especially for those guys who are top leaders. You know, you have the opportunity to become an emperor, to rule China by yourself. And
Meritocracy.
yeah, that's really. I mean, well, it's really depends on how strong you are, how powerful you are, and how many people will follow you, something like that. But interestingly, for these over 2,000 years of Chinese history, it was said all dynasties followed the rule of Qin, which means the mode of governance is similar. So this 2,000 years of history, for this 2,000 years of history, there's no fundamental changes in terms of political and legal institutions and structures. Definitely there are many, changes on the name, but not the essence, not the substantive stuff there. All similar. Actually, Chairman Mao said this stuff. All dynasties follow the rule of Qin. We call it in China, 百代皆秦政. So 100 generations, no different from Qin's rule actually. And also, all changes of these dynasties always been accompanied with violent rebellions, uprisings, revolutions, wars, always like that. We don't have a peaceful transformation.
So, did you say that the dynasties themselves did not have hereditary succession? Would the emperor appoint his successor?
Well, within a dynasty, they have. Like some of the emperors give their power to their sons, their son become emperor. But for these dynasties, what I'm saying is kind of these emperors not in one family. They change the name of the country, they change the title, they change everything. So that's a dynasty rather than rely on the emperor. So some of the dynasties, they are pretty long actually, over 200 years. They changed many emperors, but they never changed the name of the dynasty. Like Qing dynasty is always the same. Always same. Their sons, grandsons to become emperor, but they don't change this system actually. So even within a dynasty, the change of emperors always go with blood, always with fighting within these brothers, within these sons and grandsons, lots of fights going on in Chinese history. And also, for this more than 2,000 years of history, it's always despotic. And Montesquieu and many other thinkers commented on this. I think he's talking about China. It's not possible to find a single trait marking a free soul. And we'll never see there anything but the heroism of servitude here. I think that's basically the case. So I'm trying to ask a couple of questions in this project. Why China has been trapped into this kind of cycle for such a long time? And can we avoid violent change, violent revolutions? What kind of challenges we are facing? Will China become a democracy? So for the China Express, there are many discussions in the past 20 years. Some of them are really optimistic. Now probably they changed their view already. And many others are quite pessimistic. for China's future. Even today's news, TV programs, all about China. Nothing like 20 years ago when I was here, never mentioned China. But today, all the time, the newspapers always talk about China, China-US relationship, whether the deal can be made, and other kinds of problems going on. It's really amazing. And why Tocqueville? I think he have a great deal to say regarding the situation in China, regarding what I just said about these cycles, these violent revolutions, these challenges of democratic transformation. I think first of all, I would use his analytical framework, his analytics, to work on this project. He talked about basically three things: physical conditions, laws and institutions, and mores in his great book, Democracy in America. And I think that mores is more important than laws and institutions, and institutions are more important than physical conditions. I think that's great insight. Well, he borrowed a lot of stuff from Montesquieu, I believe. But I think he presented a coherent framework, stronger framework than anyone before. I think that's very useful, very important for me to work on this project, because very few China experts really pay any attention to this moral stuff, to this, moral and intellectual state in China, what's going on. Well, definitely there's some literature talk about the political culture in China, but very general, very philosophical discussions, but no one really going to China to see what's going on for the people on the ground, what kind of morality they have, and things like that. I think that's what I will work on. It's very complicated. Not only there are many historical stuff, but also we need to look at the current situation there, because it changed so much in the past 150 years since China is open to the Western world and to engage with the Western civilization. Another thing I think is very important is for Tocqueville is his complicated understanding of democracy, and his insightful judgment of the democratic foundations. He spent a great deal of time talk about the local self-governance in the U.S. He thinks that's a foundation for American democracy, especially in New England, like here. If there's no such kinds of town meetings and the local liberty, local democracy. By the way, very few contemporary scholars talk about the local liberty. They even, they never use this term, local liberty, local democracy. Like Tocqueville frequently talk about this. I think that's the foundation of national democracy. Without this kind of foundation, it's impossible to have a really stable, liberal, constitutional democracy in a larger context. So, and also I think no one probably have a better understanding of the problem of centralization, understand better than Tocqueville. He talked about this issue many times, not only in his Democracy in America, but also in his older regime. He thinks that it's one of the main reasons why the French Revolution happened in France. Such violent revolution and betrayed the goal of the revolution. The beginnings wants liberty and equality, but at the end it gets nothing than servitude, nothing than slavery, things like that. I made a great distinction between governmental centralization and administrative centralization. I think probably you all know that, familiar with that. And I think governmental centralization is necessary, especially for a big country, but administrative centralization is really harmful. You got lots of stuff, I won't repeat this. A lot of problems he understands much more better than other thinkers, I think. Well, going back to Chinese history, we saw this kind of trend or tendency of centralization going on for a long time. I mean, after Qin dynasty changed the feudal system, it become pretty centralized. We have a prefecture county system, which means the emperors govern the whole country by appointing the local officials, the cadres, the mandarins. They govern in the name of the emperor. They are not identified with local interests, with the local people, identified with the imperial interest all the time. Even now, that I think that's not changed. The local cadres always think they are the delegates of the central government. They have nothing to do with local people. They have nothing to do with local society, with local interest. Interestingly, in Chinese history, we have a kind of system, we call it avoidance. So if local officials cannot be born in the place where they govern, they have to go to another province, another place to govern there. But that never changed the problem of corruption. When they got a new place, they easily, got the new interests there with the local elites. So it's more and more centralized from Qin to late dynasty. And in the early 20th century, we have a brief local self-government movement. We call it something like the United Provinces movement, 联省自治. Some provinces declared their independence at the beginning and made their own constitutions. Especially in Hunan province, the constitution was enforced there for 4 years. A real good constitution, probably the best one in Chinese history. But later on, the Nationalist Party wants to unify the country by using force. They cannot tolerate such kind of a separation of the country. And so the local self-government movement was stopped in 1926. And after the Communist Party took over, it became actually much more centralized. And they controlled every village, every factory, every family. They can decide how many kids you can have, how many children you can have. That's just crazy. And the real despotism. That's socialism. If you don't understand socialism, you look at that kind of, way of the mode of governing, you will understand. This is a famous historian. His name is Qianmu. He said from Han to Tang dynasty, there was a tendency of centralization. But later, during Song, Ming, and Qing dynasty, these are all late dynasties, it's more centralized. And thus, local politics declined increasingly. Today, it's become a serious problem in Chinese politics. So local politics has been the most important issue in the history of Chinese politics because China is a huge country. So the performance of local administration is okay. Well, we understand this. He's a Confucian scholar. It's new Confucian scholar in the 20th century. Tocqueville very rarely talk about China. He has a footnote about China. I think pretty much interesting. His travelers tell us that Chinese have tranquility without happiness. industry without progress, stability without force, the material order without public morality. That's quite harsh. Chinese people doesn't like it, I believe now, but I think it's pretty cool. So he from France. He thought France is the most centralized country in Europe. When he reads a little bit about China, he said China is more centralized than France. It's the most typical model, the case of centralization. Lu Xianpai, who is a famous sinologist who worked at MIT as a professor, probably he's the only China expert who became APSA president. He's the only one. He's a famous guy. He's not only wrote about China, he also wrote a lot about political culture, political development, with Verba, with Almond, and many other well-known American political scientists, I think. He was born in China. He knows a great deal of China.
Missionary kid, right?
Yeah, he wrote a lot about the Chinese politics, Chinese history. Has some good stuff to say on this centralized regime. The Chinese conviction that all power should reside in the central authority has been one of the most powerful factors in shaping Chinese history. It has preserved the unitary political system in China and made Chinese uneasy whenever their cultural world has been sundered by contending political authorities. Wow, that's really interesting. He thought the Chinese people has kind of cultural myth about the centralization. I cannot get out of this. I think the Chinese political system never reflected this diversity in China, geographically, economically, religiously. It's so big. Everywhere is different. Even the people cannot understand each other. For the northern people, when you go to the southern part, for those people, especially the rural people, they cannot talk in Mandarin. You cannot understand them. It's even difficult than English for me. I cannot understand a little bit of English, but I cannot understand what they are talking about there. So for such kind of country, we never have, take into account this in terms of the political system. And now, of course, it's much more centralized. And Beijing is China. Tocqueville said Paris was France. That's the same thing 200 years ago. And within Beijing, only one leader has the final say. Who is this guy?
Economist doesn't like Xi, obviously.
Right. And it's a picture, it's a funny picture. A few years ago, a mayor of Zhenjiang city, which is in southern part of China, in Guangdong province, when he got approved the document from the central government, he kissed this document in front of that bureau. He said, we wait for 30 years to get this approval. I remember Tocqueville talk about, in France, around the revolution, he talked about even to repair a church, you need approval from Paris. So that's the same thing. So it's just this guy is, he's applying for building a new factory. Actually, it's
30 years?
Well, he's not applied.
Needed.
He didn't apply for more than 30 years. He applied for probably six years, something like that.
That's reasonable.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, but he think he think the 34 years is the local people's, or they want this kind of stuff for 34 years. So finally they got the dream come true. He said in a statement.
There's still a lot.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's ridiculous. Now, even for local county government, you want to do something, get some land, you have to get approval from the central government. It's highly centralized. Everything. You miss it?
Yeah, no, I want to take a
I'll
picture.
go back
Kiss,
later.
kiss the document.
Okay.
Don't worry.
No. Some of the China Express talk about this, especially Lucian Pai. I think this cultural myths manufactures relate to this kind of belief why Chinese people always want to centralize the government, why they think that's good for them. The manufacturers, this confusion thinking. Also, they want to enlighten the despot. They think the central authority is always smarter, always better than local authority. They have more knowledge. They care more about the local people. I remember it's about 20 years ago when I went to a village in China. The local to interview there for my dissertation. The local people, the parents told me that they always think that the premier in Beijing is good.
Yeah.
They always care about them. They know them much more better than the local cadres and the local officials. Only because this guy didn't enforce the order from the central government. We are in the miserable situation. Not because the central government doesn't care about us. They care about us very much. You see, because they got this kind of impression from the TV, from the propaganda. They think they're always in the heart of the central leaders. That's really, it's amazing. Only for those people who have opportunity to go to Beijing to petition for their for their miserable situation, maybe they have a better understanding whether the center care about them or not. But anyway, I think still many people think the center is good. Only local authorities are bad. These guys are bad guys. They didn't enforce the order of the emperors. That's their problem. And we always like uniform laws and institutions, strong sense of national unity and nationalism. In China, it's very hard for you to talk about the Tibetan problem, Xinjiang problem, Taiwan problem, Hong Kong. No, you cannot talk about that. That's very dangerous, very sensitive topics in China. Because not only the government don't like that, even the common people, even the ordinary people think that the unity is the most important thing for the country. The stability is the most important thing for the country, for the nation. That's kind of crazy stuff going on all the time, and the fear of factions, and all the time. Unlike James Madison, trying to channel the factions stuff by building a federal republic. We never ever came up with that kind of idea or accept that kind of idea. People always fear about local kingdoms and separatist attempts. So that's basically the institutional stuff I focus on in that paper. Here, one say a little bit more in my larger project, which is focusing on mores, the moral and the intellectual state in China, not only historically speaking, but also currently, what's going on there. I think Tocqueville emphasized religion pretty much we saw in all of his writings. I think religion is a key part of this mores, especially Christianity he prefers. I think in terms of religion, we really have an enormous challenge. The country generally is atheist, you can say. Most of the people, probably 80% people are not religious. And among this group, many actually anti-religion. They don't like, they think religion is kind of enemy for them. And always be careful when they deal with the Christianity, Western religions. They think they try to change China by using that. By the way, we have a long history of missionaries who are working in China, several centuries. They did a lot of great things there. They built many universities in China. So in the top universities, hospitals, a lot of great things. After 1949, many of them were really, overthrown by the government. We changed the name of them, we changed everything. We kicked those missionaries out of the country. Now very, very few missionaries who are working in China. I know there are lots of them working in South Korea, in Taiwan, the other countries, but not in China. So the communist, the socialist ideologies, religion is opium. So, and the Communist Party members cannot be religious. Yeah, can be go faster. Yeah. And also rationalism, scientism, that's popular in China since Chinese people knows Western science. It's pretty popular. And Tocqueville stuff, I will not repeat it. And Tocqueville also talked about relationship between equality and freedom. I think in democratic age, the people love equality more than freedom. That's certainly the case in China, maybe much more stronger than many other places in the United States. If we regard democracy as a kind of equality of conditions, we can see China is a democracy. It's pretty equal there because there's no aristocracy. We eliminated aristocracy more than 2,000 years ago. So, everybody is equal there. In traditional China, if you pass some exams, you can become a top leader, top official in China. Now it's the same thing. If you can pass the exam, you can go to college, you can change your fate, you can change your life fundamentally. That's still the case. But that doesn't mean we don't have discrimination. Does not mean some groups of the people don't have privileges. They do. They have lots of them. We'll go to that in a minute. So they always love equality. If they cannot achieve equal freedom, they would have equal servitude, equal slavery. So they also believe some animals are more equal than others, that Orwellian stuff. So Tocqueville have two theses in his book when he's talking about why the people prefer equality more than freedom. It's very interesting. I think when a country achieves the equality before they taste freedom, it's easy for them to love equality. And to have freedom, it needs a lot of work, it needs sacrifice, it's difficult. To have equality, he said, you just need to live. If you don't die, you will get equality. So, and also he talked about this issue, especially in his Old Regime book. People, he found that French people are similar during that period of time, but they are always separate, they're indifferent to each other. They hate each other. That's exactly what's happening in China. People are really same. They're no different from each other, but they don't like each other. The urban people don't like the rural people. The rural people hate the urban people because urban people get much more welfare, much more privileges than the rural people. We have a household registration system which divided the rural and urban people strictly. So if you are, from a rural area, only very few ways you can change your fate. One of them is go to college, and but even now, for now, even if you go to college, it's difficult to change that. Like many years ago, I was born in a village. Actually, I'm a rural peasant. More than 20 years ago. But after I went to college, I become an urban resident. I can enjoy the benefits that urban people enjoy. That's really, ridiculous. That's exactly like what happened in France 200 years ago. And also officials and versus ordinary people, they have a lot of privileges. I don't want to go to detail, maybe later.
Maybe another 5 minutes so we can get into the questions and contribute a little bit.
Try to finish this very full.
Yeah,
very
I know
soon.
you have 13 slides. Right?
And Tocqueville also talked about public spirit in his Democracy in America. I think that's very important for the country to enjoy freedom. We are really lack of this kind of stuff in China. The people are atomistic. The extreme individualism, you can say that. They only care about themselves. They don't care about public interests. They don't see the close relationship between that, actually. And also the people don't like rules. They don't like laws. They think that's not good, especially when it's not convenient for them. I will give you a picture here. This is a very famous Chinese style of crossing road. Several years ago, in the media talk about this a lot. Even for the Western media, noticed this. This is crazy. Even for the traffic rules, they don't want to follow. Not only for the walking people, but also for the cars. If we don't have the video cameras, the cars all go through the red light. Because in the big cities, everywhere is video cameras. So that's why the driving people stop. If you don't have that, if you go to a small town, it's crazy there. You have to be very careful to drive there. That's 中国式过马路, which means Chinese style of crossing road. See the policeman there? You have to hold that to let people know. That's crazy. Tocqueville also talked about materialism in the democratic age. That's really what's happening in China, more extreme than many other places. I believe everybody loves money, loves wealth. I think most of the people, they only want wealth. They want nothing else. We have people when you talk about the freedom with them, they always ask you, freedom can be eaten, so it means 自由能当饭吃嘛 in Chinese. So why is that important? It's only material stuff are important for them. Everybody want the money. It's crazy. So luxury stuff, they all go shopping everywhere, even including here now. So wealthy people, even the monks, they cannot resist those kinds of bags. Stuff they drive.
Might be a Chinese knockoff.
You don't know that.
They are driving Mercedes. They're driving BMW now. They're using iPhone.
Monks and BMWs?
Yeah.
That's a good website.
Yeah. So so many challenges. What can be done? I think institutionally we need to move toward decentralization and federalism. I think that should be the goal. It's not easy, it's hard. Even probably only a couple of scholars talk about the federalism in China. Very, very few people. No one talk about it because it's sensitive, it's dangerous. When you talk about that, the government always think you are separatist. You want to separate this country. You want independence of Tibet, Uyghur, so that kind of stuff. So that's why it's really tough. But how can you govern such a big country without federalism, without decentralization? I mean, it's impossible for your decisions to be enforced in locals. That's
So it is autonomous, the Uyghurs and the Tibet. They have more autonomy than the other provinces,
well,
technically, or in law,
well,
legally.
legally. Yeah, we have 5 regions, we call them autonomous regions.
Yeah.
So all minority regions. So you see the color, the yellow color, but they are not really autonomous at all. Maybe like Uyghurs, Xinjiang, now under more control than other parts of the country.
Oh, I see.
This is militarized actually. There are tens of thousands of policemen there every day. To use internet is very difficult there. To change the mores, that's even harder, I think. That's even harder. But well, we have to work on that from many angles, from many perspectives. Will China become a democracy in the future? Maybe it depends on the people, I think. Depends on the people on the ground.